Yeah.
And that's still more of like the older school way of doing things as well, because you're making this setting.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a campaign, it's a setting.
Yeah.
And then you are letting your players explore it at will.
If there are particular games out there that you enjoy that are technically a simulator, so to speak, I'm wondering what they are and what you enjoy from them.
Podcast simulator.
Podcast simulator, we do that every week. Which is why you see rangers fighting saber-toothed tigers but never cows. They are afraid of cows. Now, I read that and I was like, wow, there's so much to unpack there. Wait a second.
I think we should just leave it packed in and just throw it in the trash.
Well, Alex, are you ready to play the role of a podcaster?
Yes, I'm gonna roll for charisma and fail remarkably.
That sounds about right for our show, and speaking of which, welcome everybody to Total Pebble Knockdown, where we fail constantly. My name is Nathan.
And I am failing to be Alex.
That's right. He failed so much to be Alex that he's Nathan now. That's scary.
Oh god.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh, no. No. First up on the show, Alex, I hear that we had an interesting conversation with one of the old guard of D&D.
Yeah, so last night, as it were, at the date of recording, one of my coworkers was wearing a D&D shirt, and it was a older shirt. And so I was like, oh, is that a D&D shirt? Because it was under the rest of their vest.
Sure.
And so we ended up having a 2-hour long talk about D&D. And this person is older, probably mid-50s, 60s, around that age.
Okay.
And so it was a very interesting conversation about old school D&D versus, say, they're in a 5th edition game now with their, I guess, wife and grandson, maybe?
Okay.
Something like that. Anyways, they're in a 5th edition game and they're like, I play it, but it's kind of mindless for me. It's not like it's not like it used to be, is the sentiment that I got there.
Yeah. They don't make them like they used to, if we're going
Yeah,
with the recent
and
topic
I
of
thought it was
conversation.
interesting
Yeah.
to talk about not just not to shit on old school or shit on new school, but the difference between as they put it, in old school D&D, you played a role. You were a fighter, you were a magic user, or an archer, etc. As opposed to the new stuff where you're playing a character.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting that. So it's more or less like in the old school, there was a specific type of thing that you're supposed to be doing that benefits the party, and in the newer one, it's about you as a character journey, more or less.
I think that's kind of the way it is. And I get that, and in video game RPGs, you play a role a lot of times, as in,
right.
I am playing WoW, and I am a shaman.
Sure.
So I am a caster, or I am a melee DPS, or I am a healer. That is my role when I'm in a party. You know?
Sure.
As opposed to D&D these days, where it's a lot more, I feel like it's a lot more narrative driven on the characters and who they are and what they're doing, as opposed to just, I am a fighter and I fight. Right. And they were saying, a lot of that too it wasn't about what your character's skills, your character sheet says. It's more what your character does.
Right.
So it's really interesting to hear that from someone who is playing a 5e game, but also is part of what we would consider the old guard, who had played 1st and 2nd editions of D&D.
Right.
And I just think it's really interesting that it's come from that point in the game where you're playing an archetype versus playing a character who is a multifaceted being, as opposed to just making your character be that archetype. You have a character who is more fleshed out, has a background, has a story that they're exploring. I don't know, it's just kind of weird, kind of interesting, and fascinating in a way to see like the mentality of someone who is still stuck in like first, second edition, where that is how role-playing games used to be back in the good old days of role-playing.
Right. The thing about it is, like, immediately when I start thinking about that controversy, though, I start thinking a little bit about, or conversation, I should say, I think about, like, in Final Fantasy, because sometimes those games would have the job system, and sometimes they wouldn't. So in some of those iterations, it would be about making sure that the individual characters in your game had specific roles that they were going to fulfill, and in other ones, it was much more about their individual storylines. And I don't know if that influences how people liked certain versions of the game, or which one, because I think it was like in 10, they didn't really have that, but then when 10.2 came around, they put the job system back in. So
well, 10 it was more about the character's journey,
right?
But each of them was a specific thing,
right?
So your party would consist of who you wanted, but you could swap out whoever you wanted in 10 at will. But it was more about who you wanted to have in your party to fulfill the specific role,
right?
And the other thing they were saying too, this person was like, back then, we might only have a group of like 4 or 5 people, but people would be playing multiple characters.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's not as much a thing these days because, your characters are more fleshed out and can be more diverse.
Yeah, I was listening to a conversation not too long ago, or a video where they were talking about the old kind of Gygaxian way of playing the game, which does kind of come out of the wargaming, oeuvre as it was. And the idea was to have a stable of characters. And at any time when you go to play, because it's like supposed to be an ever-evolving game world that your characters are in, you would pick one of those characters that you were going to be using who happens to be in the area where you are playing. And so if your characters die, you still have other characters that you might be playing.
Right, and that's really interesting because, again, these days, you don't tend to see an RPG where you're playing multiple characters. Again, unless you're playing a video game RPG in which you are solo playing and you control a whole party.
Right.
But, like, typically on tabletop RPGs, we don't as often have games where you have a stable of characters. You have your players, and they each are playing a specific character, or you might have like a one-shot where you're playing a character that takes place somewhere else in the world. For instance, to break up a thing. But it's more of a campaign is telling a story of these characters, and then if someone dies, you can replace them or make a new character or have a journey. Like when Hef died in my game, the other player went on a journey to bring me back to life.
Right.
So it's really interesting to see that because we have characters who are a lot more fleshed out, I feel, and you can grow closer to as a player and grow more invested in their story and their growth. And as opposed to that, that group of players or characters you've got, which I feel like you wouldn't be able to grow as attached to.
Right. There was another thing that they were talking about that I thought was very interesting, which was the idea that all of your players for the game may not be playing at the same time.
Yes.
So that you would have like maybe 3 people were playing over here with some of their characters, and then on your like Thursday session, you would have a few other characters that would be playing, and that these groups were working in tandem at like the same time frames. And so what happens with this group over here informs essentially what you're going to come across if you get to that area with a different group, which does feel like it is much more of an outgrowth of that whole wargaming idea of having multiple units on a battlefield, but in a much grander scope, almost like it was like the MMO before the MMO was a thing.
Yeah. One of the other points that we were talking about as well was the fact that back in the heyday, games, you didn't make a campaign. What you made was a world that your players were in.
Yes.
And what you would do is the players got to choose like whatever they wanted to do, It was more of an open world thing where the players got to dictate what they do instead of the DM making a story that they're exploring and you're telling. And that is, I've done this before,
Yes.
and I've been like, cool, you have this entire world to do. You start here, what do you guys want to do? And the problem is that you get players who don't know what they want to do. You have a whole world, that's a lot. If I go, Nathan, you can go anywhere in the world you want right now. Plane ticket, here you go.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to go, shit, where am I going? I don't know.
Yeah, you get choice paralysis.
Yeah,
that's what that is, yeah.
With newer versions of D&D and newer versions of role-playing games and just how, like, the growth of the genre has gone, I think storytelling has grown into, like, more of the focus of that.
Yeah.
Especially since video games, again, exist now and are very good at letting you explore an open world in a lot of cases.
Right.
And having more stories that you can explore. Fallout, for instance, it's a pretty big game. There's a lot there to explore, and you can go anywhere and do anything. You don't have to do the story that's provided.
Right. The idea of the open world is something that video games ended up taking on considerably, especially with like the epic RPGs and how that functions. They did what they could, though, for those to actually have quests that you go on, so that you do not have that choice paralysis. You always have at least a direction you can follow if you would like. I think that might be a problem that more modern tabletop players might have, going back to the old school way of doing things, where just like saying, well, here's all of Faerun.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't mind either of these personally. I've played games where, and I've played and run games where it was an open world.
Yes.
And as a DM, I feel like making an open world is a lot harder.
Oh, yeah.
Because suddenly you have to make, you and your Rift Hunters, again, it wasn't necessarily an open world, but you made a whole world, for that, with your story beats and what you wanted, and you tried to get your players to go on a specific path, and they were, like, everywhere else, Corralling players is a thing.
Yeah.
But with a focus on storytelling, you can make a smaller environment.
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be a whole world with multiple things going on at once. Right. Because you're only exploring a portion of it at a time.
Yeah, this was actually something I was thinking about not too long ago, which was the idea of, maybe like limiting focus, but allowing for more openness in that limited focus by building an actual city. And just making sure that the city was completely populated with things that were going on at that time that were continually in motion that the players don't really know about at the beginning. And then you drop the players into the middle of that city and you tell them, like, you can give them the entire map layout of that entire town, that entire city, all the back alleys, everything like that, and just let them go nuts. But there's always going to be stuff.
That sounds like a lot of planning.
But by focusing it on that one urban environment, essentially, instead of the world.
Yes, you could flesh out a whole city.
Exactly, and I kept thinking of these fun ideas where maybe they go back down a back alley, not realizing that there's actually the makings of like an undead invasion that's happening behind some of those doors, and if they happen to, knock on those doors or try to get into those houses, they might inadvertently unleash a bunch of like zombies onto the street that would normally just be behind those doors that they might never have encountered if they didn't go down that alleyway.
Right. Yeah. And that's still more of like the older school way of doing things as well, because you're making this setting.
Yeah.
It's not a campaign, it's a setting.
Yeah.
And then you are letting your players explore it at will.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to play that way, it's fine. I have nothing against that. But I do think that having more of a narrative focus lets you tell more epic stories a lot of times, more grand stories.
And more individualistic ones, too.
Right. Yeah. As opposed to just being able to tell interesting stories.
Certainly.
Which, exploring a world will let you tell interesting stories that's just happened. A lot of that in the older days, of D&D. Even 3.5 is like, here's some random tables for encounters.
Right.
Who knows what's gonna happen? I don't know. DM doesn't know. I don't plan all this shit.
Yeah, you don't know what you're going to come across. I think that the big changeover that you've seen from like the earlier editions to what you see now is that the focus moves away from your mechanics to your role playing, the actual like individual like theatrical part of that, where you as a character, since you're not doing that stable of characters or the big like kind of wargaming framework, but more of the actual role playing aspect, are focusing in on that singular character that you want to play, and therefore have more of an investment in what that storyline is going to be, like a more focused, almost tunnel vision kind of way of looking at the game, where you know that there's a storyline that you're supposed to be going down, rather than the exploration of the world as a whole. And I can kind of understand why some people like that way of doing things, because I like open worlds in general. It's fun to be able to go and explore things. But in terms of the tabletop, where you're trying to, keep everybody engaged, I also understand why it might be a good idea to try and limit that vision a little bit. So that it makes it easier to, like, focus on the storyline. It would be weird if you went into, like, a movie and you were like, okay, well, we could just show you the movie, but actually there's multiple paths. Let's do a movie where it's like a multiple choice choose your own adventure movie where everybody has to sign in to determine where they're going to go, and it starts playing multiple movies at the same time, and everybody kind of goes, wow, that movie was weird. Did you see the same one I did? No, I didn't see that one. I didn't get that ending.
I think there's been a few YouTube channels who have done stuff like that, where you get to choose which ending you pick of the video and go down a branch about that. I think Markiplier did that once.
Yes, that was an experiment that I think he tried. I don't know how it worked out. I
think it worked out well for him, but I mean, that's Markiplier, so.
Yeah, he can do whatever he wants. It's gonna work out okay. He'll be fine. He can end up being a centaur in a Ninja Sex Party video, and people will love it. It's fine. Everything's good. But I think one of the big things that changes too, from like maybe the 3.5 era to when we end up with 5, is that, let's be honest, one of the big resurgences of the genre and Dungeons and Dragons in particular was the actual streaming of games, was the actual, like, theater kids in some respect getting in and doing it as a performance, as a show, and using it as a storytelling device, because I think that's why a lot of people started playing 5e,
Definitely. I think the change happened well before 5e, though.
Okay.
I don't think 5e was the one that went, oh yeah, this is going to be very different. I think just the general mindset of role-playing from other games existing and just how people have come into it has generally just changed the landscape a lot. Because there are other games that are very role-play heavy, like Fiasco, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Fate, for instance.
Sure.
There are games that are less mechanically heavy and more interesting in telling stories. And I think just the way people approach games has changed over the years as well.
Oh, yeah. Powered by the Apocalypse, which has a ton of different systems that are involved, much more roleplay heavy, much more rules light. And that does seem to be like the trajectory that a lot of the role-playing games are going on, away from the really technically involved sort of realm.
And I think part of that becomes the ease of introduction to your players. As you were talking a bit before the show, you aren't really familiar with old school D&D as much. I think you played 3.5 with me once.
Yeah, it was that crypt that we never got out of.
Yeah. That one session.
Yeah.
But that was a very different game than 5e. It's very mechanically heavy. And then other games are also very mechanically heavy. As you were looking at Pathfinder, which is based off of 5e, and Pathfinder 2e, you were telling me that it's like, I don't know if I could learn this on my own or be able to run this on my own. And it's very dense in how you do it. Like, if you're not going to read that rulebook from front to back,
Yeah, I'm
and
gonna get
study
lost.
it,
Yeah,
you're gonna get lost.
yeah,
And just like with the book I've got here, Wrath and Glory, it's
yeah.
a big book. It's it's all the DM and player stuff in one.
Helpful.
But
Yeah.
even this is a more streamlined version of a much, much heavier mechanically bound system.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. I don't know if they've really built a version. I mean, maybe this is what they'd like to eventually do with like one D&D, but a version where it can be as mechanically dense or light as you would want, trying to just modify it for the players. Because I always feel like in 5e, there's a lot of systems that you don't necessarily engage in that get hand waved away, even though that
encumbrance.
they are there. Encumbrance, exhaustion, material components as a general thing, tremor sense, there's a ton of them. And you don't have to follow any of them. A lot of people hand wave them away. But I feel like if you took into account all of the mechanics that are like underneath it, it might be more mechanically rich, but like I don't think that you necessarily couldn't do in a 5e what they used to do the way they played the older games. It's just that it's not really tailored to that. It's tailored to the individual experiences and the character growth.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely make my players keep track of every single arrow they have. I could make them keep track of all the weight they're carrying and be like, you're 1 pound over what it says you can carry in the book.
Yes. Yeah.
You're slowed down, you're exhausted, or, sleeping in armor, donning and doffing armor, for instance.
Yep.
Plate armor takes like an hour to get into.
Right.
Or however long it takes.
Yeah.
It's like...
How much realism do you want in your fantasy role-playing game?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, do you want to follow the rules to a T? Do you want to be like, yes, you're not wearing armor in bed. You have to take 5 minutes to put your armor on, or you're going to be just fighting unarmored. It's like, all right, well, okay.
Do I take emotional damage?
Yeah, I don't typically, unless there's a reason for it, in the story sense, or in just for suspense or whatever. I won't be like, cool, you guys are going to camp for the night. Are you taking your armor off?
Yeah.
It's just like, I hand wave that away because unless I plan on doing something that requires you being caught unaware and unarmored, it's just pedantic to do.
Right. It's also going to make me want to play a monk.
Yeah, well, that too. Or a caster. But,
yeah.
It's that type of thing. It's like, do I want to waste the time on my end and my player's end with things that don't matter?
Yeah. In an old school sense, when you have that, like, a cast of characters that you're playing in that big open world, I think especially for the time, it was probably a really cool idea. Like, you'll never see that kind of thing back in, the 70s and 80s. You would have never seen that because we didn't have video games. We didn't have, the internet as we know it today. And so those big kind of open world, very lofty sort of game worlds were kind of relegated to the tabletop world. But I can also see it being one of those things that gets so bogged down in the weeds that it becomes very difficult for a modern player who might want to just jump in to really get their head around all of those rules. And I think that might be where we get into the more new school that is not used to that old way of looking at things, and that they're in it for other things. I think that's really what it amounts to, is that the players of today are looking for something as a different experience than maybe the people who played once upon a time.
Yeah.
Now, I've also seen some people that are, from the heyday that translated over to 5e just fine. Mm-hmm. And also enjoy the idea of doing that role-playing, maybe because they didn't get it as much, but wanted to from the old way.
Definitely did not start role-playing with that, for like the 5e experience. It was very mechanically heavy, and it wasn't so much of being in character and character growth. So even now, it's still harder for me to completely get into that sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think my game with David, I was actually a lot better at it. And I was learning to be better at it because it was more of a structured, narrative-focused game.
Sure.
But it was amazing. It was really fun. It's
yeah.
the best game of D&D I've been in,
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
it's two different things. It's like, you can have fun either way. It depends on the experience you want to get. If you want a wargaming experience, but you have characters that you have names and do things that are fantastical, that's fine. You're playing Warcraft 3, but on the tabletop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
if you want to play a role-playing game where you can explore your character and the relationships and stories being told, that is good too.
Yes. Yeah. I was playing a game of D&D, like really the first 5e game that I played, which was when Dom was running the show. And one of the players who was also my game master when we did the 1879 game, Andy, she was used to the older school, like maybe 3.5 way of doing D&D, and she could understand 5 just fine, but I do remember her talking about how she did like the amount of character customization that you used to be able to do in games, which got streamlined a lot out of 5, which I totally understand. I actually would like more customization in my character development for levels and stuff. That would
Definitely
be great. But so I understand that divide. The one thing that I'm not always on board for, and I was mentioning this a little bit beforehand, was the idea that anyone's taking away someone's fun. I don't really, because I feel like that's a conversation that you always end up with. It's like, these people ruined D&D in the new way.
They did not. You don't have to play new editions. You don't have to play 5e if you don't want. You can stick to your AD&D and no one's going to stop you.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with actual wargaming.
Yes.
No one's ruined my Warhammer experience. If I want to play 3rd edition Warhammer and have the rulebooks and find someone who wants to play that with me, I can do that.
Exactly. No one took away your fun. Folks, no one took it away.
No one took away your fun. You're refusing to move to further editions in the series. And that's okay.
And that's okay, and I'm sure that there are other people around who would love to be able to play an older version too. It's not going to be me. I'm not going back to AD. I never played A&D. I can't wrap my head around it. I don't want to. Yes.
Listen, Nathan, if I just want to watch the first 2 seasons of Rick and Morty and never think there's anything past that, I can.
Yeah, exactly.
And no one can tell me otherwise. I can just put my fingers in my ears and go, I'm Pickle Rick. Ah!
If you know what, if we could just go back and just pretend that the 8th season of Game of Thrones never happened, great.
just pretend it doesn't exist, and you are not ruining anyone's fun.
Yeah, exactly.
See, that's how that works.
It can exist for people, and you can say that it sucks, and that's fine, and I'd probably agree with you. But it doesn't mean that it has to ruin the rest of it for you.
I have a great example of that. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. My favorite 5-part trilogy.
Yes.
There is a 6th book in the series, quote unquote. There is a final book that somebody else wrote.
Yeah.
Because it was after Douglas Adams died, and I guess Douglas Adams had wanted to kind of go back and make it more of a happy ending than the 5th one, which kind of ended up like left off on kind of a very... excuse me. The 5th book, which kind of left off on a kind of depressing note. I thought it was fine. Whatever, I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it, but a different author had gone back and kind of tried to pay tribute with a 6th book after that series, and I read it.
Sure.
And it's absolute garbage, in my opinion.
It's not good, yeah.
It didn't do Douglas Adams justice. I understood where they were trying to emulate his writing style, and I could appreciate that, I think. But it just wasn't the same, and it wasn't good in my opinion. It was very strange.
Right.
So I have this book, and I'm like, this is tantamount to fan fiction for me.
Right.
It's like, it is not a book that is part of the original series. I would not tell other people to read it, and it doesn't ruin my fun of the original books.
Right.
Because I don't consider it part of that series. Because it's not. It was made after by somebody else.
Right.
Again, 5th edition D&D was made after by other people that didn't work on, or potentially didn't work on,
Right.
AD&D or 3.5.
Right.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, Gary Gygax isn't really around anymore to like oversee the projects or anything. TSR isn't really around. I mean, I guess they technically are, but they don't really work on Dungeons and Dragons. But a lot of people that were influenced by it are involved in the space, and they've made it their own thing, but that doesn't stop the texts that existed before from existing, and the adventures that existed once upon a time from existing. They still are there, and they can be there. Don't think that everybody just took something away from you. That's you trying to be a victim. I'm sorry.
Anyways,
but
I think the TLDR of this has been, you can play how you want. No one's going to stop you, and if they don't want to play that way, they'll find a game they want to play.
Yeah, and I think that the takeaway that I'd like to give people too is, I believe that more than attacking someone else for that they're not having the fun that they want, I think that we end up getting better informed and getting a better product if we talk to each other about what we actually enjoy. Like, I feel like Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, any of those, having the old school folks talk about what they really liked about it and having the new school folks talk about what they really liked about it can only increase, like, making a better version continually for the product itself. Like, you could, and that doesn't even have to be from Wizards of the Coast themselves, but like how we play. Like, we can learn from what came before, and we can also take in the new stuff that we found we really enjoy, and build something that might be rich and big and mechanically advanced, but also have really interesting, detailed, rich storylines and character development. There's no saying that you can't have both of those.
Yes, there's no saying that. And also, Session Zero really helps figure out what your game should be.
Please do that. Because almost every horror story I have ever seen from D&D or Tabletop amounts to they didn't have a Session Zero. and
in old school, there was no Session Zero, I don't think.
That wasn't really a thing, I don't think. No.
Not that I'm aware of, it was not before.
No, and safety tools and stuff like that. That's kind of like a new invention, but, I think a generally good one that I would even want to take into an old school version of the game. Like, again, newer school stuff.
That's a whole different discussion of, safety tools, who needs that? But we're not going to get into that right now.
Not at the moment. That's a much longer conversation we might want to talk to somebody about. But at any rate, in this case, I would pose a question to everybody if you are down in the comments or you're over in our Discord channel about what were your favorite things about Dungeons & Dragons? Like, what is your favorite aspect of it, and what do you want to make sure is preserved for the future that people could integrate in?
I would actually expand that to older and newer role-playing games in general. It doesn't have to be D&D, but like, what do you like about old school versus new school? Or are you an old school role player, or are you a part of the new camp that has been focused? Do you focus more on open world or roleplay?
Yeah.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah. Why do you play role-playing games?
Yeah. Why do you role play? Or get at us in our Discord link down below.
Down below. So, Alex, have you ever considered that we live in a simulation?
Yeah, and now I've got some existential dread. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, segment over. No, what? So, I don't know if you've realized this. I'm pretty sure you have. But it seems like the word simulator ends up on a lot of video games lately. And
in general, it's a very large genre.
It is, and it's so
The Sims is a life simulator.
It's so large, in fact, that I feel like they're so all over the place that I'd like to try and figure out a way to, like, wrap my head around it, because there are simulators that feel like actual simulators. They're like Flight Simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Yep. I have Elite Dangerous, which you know about, which is a kind of a flight sim, but also a space sim. It also there is a background simulation in the game that is extensively huge. Like, for different faction powers, trading, all that stuff that goes on that you don't even really pay attention to unless you want to.
Right, yeah. And then you have, like, the Surgeon Simulator and the Goat Simulator.
Which is great.
Yes.
Which is less great. Surgeon Simulator is fantastic.
Surgeon Simulator is fascinating, only because I don't know why I can't, like, control my hand the way I want to control my hand.
On that note, have you ever seen Hand Simulator?
No.
I'm going to share a video with you later.
Okay.
It's going to crack you up.
That's perfect. On a similar note, Goat Simulator, Deer Simulator. What was the one that just came? Oh, yeah, we had Lawnmower and Power Wash Simulator.
And Viscera Cleanup Detail, which is also a cleaning simulator.
Yeah.
And then Farming Sim.
Farming Simulator, yeah.
Sim City, which is a city sim, or colony. And then RimWorld is a colony sim. Dwarf Fortress is a colony sim.
Yeah.
Boy, yeah, there's a lot of simulation games of different types.
Yeah. To try and narrow focus, though, I wanted to concentrate on ones that specifically say that they're a simulator in the title, because otherwise we're gonna go way off rail. Like, my thought process is when you say that I want to have a game and I want to call it a simulator, and I wanted to have it in the title, like, this is Power Wash Simulator. What is the expectation that you have when you hear that word?
Me being a power washer.
That you actually have the intention of going through the performance of doing the thing, right?
Yeah, I am the thing. I'm simulating... No, I'm not being the thing, but yes. Power Wash Simulator, I assume it is me with a power washer. And I do have the games, so that is what it is.
Yes, exactly. And Lawnmower Simulator, I figure I'm going to be mowing lawns. And Flight Simulator, I'm going to assume that this is fairly realistic in terms of how the flight controls on a plane work, and that when I push buttons, it would do basically the same thing as it does in real life, were I to be controlling a plane. Now, that's interesting. I have heard about, like, actual pilots that have played Flight Simulator, and it's kind of fascinating to watch when people actually know what they're doing.
I like it when they have the full setup of the joysticks and everything, but again, American Truck Simulator or Euro Truck Simulator.
Oh, yeah.
And those ones are more in-depth when you actually have the wheel, the sticks, the pedals. Again, I could get these things fairly dangerous, but I don't have the kind of money to blow on that kind of peripheries.
Oh my god, do you remember...
Nor do I think I'd want to.
Yeah. Do you remember when they had, what was it, Mech Warrior, or one of those games, where there was like a $200 control setup that was specifically for the game back on, like, the Xbox? And it had like a ton of buttons on it. I can't even remember. Battle Mech or something like that. I gotta find that game. But it's I was sitting there kind of thinking to myself, wow, that's a lot of money to blow on the one game to play. Luckily they made a sequel, so then you could play two separate games on that one thing that you but usually when I think about simulators, I do think about the experience of actually going through that activity, whatever that activity may be.
Surgery.
Yeah, except that then you get to ones like Surgeon Simulator, which, let's face it, is incredibly unrealistic to actual surgery. You know.
What about Spore?
Spore? I mean, I don't think Spore is realistic in any...
No, but it was a simulator of multiple types.
Of multiple types, yeah. None of them, though, I would really consider to be I don't even know if they really planned on it being in that simulator realm. I don't know.
And then you get factory sims, where you set up factory and logistic stuff.
You do. So there are those. And then you have, like, what was the one that we just played not too long ago? 100 Days? The one where we had the one...
winemaking simulator?
Yeah. But again, like... that's all based on like putting blocks down for organizational stuff, and that's not particularly realistic. I always feel like there's always something that they miss in terms of the mechanics behind it. Either it's like, oh, you had help, you didn't really pay them, or oh, you might want to eat, or you might like something that they missed, like going and fueling up your farming equipment after you do the farm part, you know. Now that will be $35 now, please, whatever, in order to fill that up. There's always things that seem like they are missing out of that. But I then find it really fascinating after doing the simulators where they're trying to be realistic to it. PC Simulator, where you actually
build a PC.
Yeah, PC building simulator. Yeah. Where it's like, you're gonna unscrew all of these. You're gonna unscrew this part. You're gonna dust this out. You're gonna put this back in. Where it's like, oh, I get the ins and outs. Like, I feel like I actually learned something about building a PC after playing PC building simulator. Like, oh, I see where everything goes in these setups. Yeah. And then Goat Simulator comes along, and now we're into demon goats that fly around on jetpacks and can use their tongue as an ancillary tool to maneuver around the world. Or Deer Simulator, where I am literally a deer with like jet boots, shooting guns at like a giant moray eel that's coming out of a top of a building.
Well, if you wanted to put it that way too, you could probably consider Grand Theft Auto to be a simulator of sorts.
I would never do that. I would never consider Grand Theft Auto to be a simulator.
I mean, I am ping a criminal. I'm simulating my life as a criminal.
That's true.
I assume you're a criminal in all of them.
That's yes. How many Grand Theft Auto games have you played?
4. Not all of them.
Because I'm trying to go through it myself, and I'm thinking, yes. I believe in every single one, the protagonist or protagonists were criminals.
I have not played one since San Andreas.
Not since San Andreas. Oh, were you playing the old school ones, like the top-down ones?
San Andreas was, like, third person.
No, I'm just saying if you
played the top-down ones
4 or
too.
5. Okay, so
I haven't played 4 or 5.
You haven't played
San
4
Andreas
or 5.
is GTA 3.
Well, GTA 3, and then you had Vice City and San Andreas.
Vice City was a step back.
I liked Vice City, but I get what you're saying.
Vice City was terrible because you went from San Andreas, which was great.
Oh, San Andreas came after.
Yeah. Well,
San Andreas came after Vice City.
No, like Liberty City Stories.
Oh, okay.
Which was just GTA 3 with a different protagonist and like added motorcycles.
Sure. Yes.
But 3 and then San Andreas came out. San Andreas was good.
Right. Well,
anyways.
No. Vice
anyways,
City
we're not talking about GTA.
Andreas, but at any rate, no, I played 3 Vice City, San Andreas, 4, and 5.
Sure.
And so, if I remember correctly, yes, every single one of them you play a criminal. And in 5, you actually technically play 3 criminals. So hey, there's that. And you get to flip between the criminals, so that's always fun. And GTA 6 is going to be about where you play criminals, so I do know that much about
Anyways.
Anywho, but what you're basically saying is that almost any game is a simulation of something.
No, I think we could break it down to like 3 specific types of simulators.
Yes,
or games we would. Okay, so the first one is pretty straightforward. It is a job simulator.
Yes, and it's meant to be realistic.
It is meant to be at least somewhat realistic. Power wash simulator, viscera cleanup detail where you're cleaning, again, somewhat realistic to cleaning up,
Yeah.
Albeit not entirely because it's ridiculous, but it's still a thing you're cleaning.
Flight simulator.
Farming simulator, flight simulator,
yeah.
Elite Dangerous, again, I would put into the more realistic but also fantastical because flight sim but space, so it's
right.
Sci-fi, but it is a simulator.
Okay.
So games like that, Job Simulator, those things.
Sure.
Those are job simulators, I would say.
Okay.
You have, let's say, I'll call it a whimsical simulator.
Okay. Okay.
That's the word I'll use because deer simulator and goat simulator would fall into this category.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not, I think, what we'd consider a simulator in the same sense.
They feel more like a parody. You know, like
yes.
they're a parody of the idea of simulators. They're the Dottism of simulators.
Yeah. So in that, I think you would get your deer simulator, your goat simulators.
Sure.
What else maybe your surgeon simulator?
I think surgeon simulator would have to fall into that category. Yeah.
Because again, as you said, parody. Then yeah, I mean it's
Granny
a
simulator.
job.
We didn't even play that yet. Yeah.
Granny simulator. Yeah. Where you play, I think that one is you play as a specific creature or role, but it is very whimsical and ridiculous.
Yes, it's supposed to be over the top, and simulator is used a little bit with a smirk. That is not really supposed to be a simulator at all, but they do call it that in order to, make a point. So, okay, yeah, we've got those. We've got two very different ends of the spectrum between realism and surrealism, basically.
Right. And then I think on the third one that I would put here, because I'm only going to do three unless we can think of a fourth, I would say are your life sims or your colony simulators or city simulators, which I would actually put the Sims into that because it is simulating something in life or the parts of life, or a city sim where you're building a city and that's a simulation of that, or like RimWorld Dwarf Fortress type games where you are doing a colony sim and running people's lives.
Right. I would say that that's a good category to put a lot of your, just like your cozy game kind of life sims. That would be like, we recently talked about like a Coral Island. Or,
actually, no, that can be the fourth. That would be the fourth.
Would be the
so you can have, you can have job simulator, whimsical simulator, your life
strategy kind of industrialist kind of
strategy or logistics simulator maybe.
Yeah.
Which are your factory games and your colony games.
Sure.
And then your cozy simulators or life sims, which are your Stardew Valley and your farming games that are more lighthearted. Coral Island, Stardew, Animal Crossing.
Right. I move to a small town and I start like building stuff. And
I moved to a small town and now I'm incredibly in debt.
It's the social simulator, I think is a good way to put that, because you're trying to interact with the community and do things that are inside of that. Like you could say that that's kind of what it's supposed to be about. Living out those lives that we may never actually get to live, where I get to have my own land and make my own.
Or I get to be a surgeon.
Yeah. I get to be a surgeon. Well, I got to be honest with you. If I was a surgeon like I was in Surgeon Simulator, I would be very, very fired.
I suddenly want there to be a game. There is a City Planner Plays City Skylines YouTube channel.
Okay.
So it's someone who actually their job is like a city planner.
Yes.
And they're playing City Skylines.
Yes.
It's a thing. They have a lot of subs. It's very interesting.
Yes.
I would like to see a surgeon play Surgeon Simulator
to see if they could actually do the Surgeon Simulator.
Just to see what they think of it.
Yes.
I may have to ask our brand designer to ask their mom.
Yeah, see if we can get that recorded for a thing.
I don't think it'll happen, but if it does,
that's
happy birthday.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, no, I do like that. I feel like there's a wonderful realm of having like professionals who actually do this for a living coming in to play simulators, no matter how ridiculous they are, just to see if they if there's anything to them. Because, you might be surprised. Surgeon Simulator might be actually very accurate, besides the, plungers and stuff that come out of it. Or the ability to, like, pop legs and stuff off and try to smack them back on. I think besides that, maybe there's something to it. Wasn't there one that came out not too long ago called Mortuary Assistant? That also,
yes.
yeah,
That's a horror game.
It is, but you also like work
also
as
a simulator. Yeah,
you work as a mortuary assistant, but then also
that is
terrible things coming at you.
That is a job simulator with horror aspects.
Okay. Out of curiosity, does Five Nights at Freddy's fall into any of this?
No, Five Nights at Freddy's is dead to me.
Yes.
If we start talking about Five Nights at Freddy's, MatPat is magically going to appear.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But
yes,
if MatPat appears, hello MatPat, would you like to come on the show sometime?
Yeah, talk to us about how Five Nights at Freddy's is either a simulator or not a simulator. Out of those four, do you have a preference for something calling it a simulator? Which one of these would you want?
For like to play?
If something is going to be a simulator, which one of these four do you personally like the most?
If only one of the four is going to be called a simulator?
Yeah. There can be only one. Highlander.
Probably Job Simulator.
Job Simulator, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't mind the other ones existing, but I do think that if you're going to call it a simulator, it would at least be nice to know that it is attempting it.
Yep.
Which is something. I mean, I guess that's why they have the caveats at the beginning that this is a life simulator or that this is, a something simulator in order to make that clear. But, yeah, I would probably be in the same camp. When I see simulator on a game, my initial thought is, oh, this is going to be very detailed, very mechanically rich, and it's going to ask a lot of me in order to perform the task at hand.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
On the note of simulators, if you are a fan of simulator games, I have a YouTube channel to suggest to you that is not the City Planner Plays City Skylines, which may not be the name of that channel. I'm sorry for that guy that I'm not plugging very well. Anyways, let's game it out.
Yes.
A fantastic trip into simulator mayhem these days. Josh absolutely destroys games.
Yes.
If you haven't seen any of his videos, you probably should. They are ridiculous.
They are.
I have one I need to watch later.
Oh God. It's the hand simulator one, isn't it?
No, that's the one that you have linked to you, and it is incredibly hilarious. It's an old one. It's back when Josh still had his co-host Anthony. It was before Josh just started destroying games.
Yeah.
But it is an incredibly ridiculous one.
If there are particular games out there that you enjoy that are technically a simulator, so to speak, I'm wondering what they are and what you enjoy from them.
Podcast Simulator.
Podcast Simulator. We do that every week.
Yes.
This has got to be a game. Man, I really hope that there's a podcast simulator. I'll have to see if there's one on Steam. I bet it's really terrible. I got a thing that came into my purview when I deigned to look up stupid questions about D&D.
This is a lot to read on my phone.
Yes, sorry about that. Anyway, so in terms of dumb D&D questions, I had this thing that came up back from 2005, way back in the 2005, that just made me scratch my head. And I was hoping that maybe you could give me some input. The Ranger into a glass of water question. A phrase I never thought I would say.
That's not a question. That's a grammatically terrible partial sentence.
Yes. Is from Dragon Magazine of yore. Skip Williams used to do an April edition, so it's like an April Fool's, I guess, of Sage Advice where he'd answer weird questions like that. Now, he ruled that under the second edition rules of the time, polymorph any object could only turn a creature into an object of uniform composition, and that a ranger could be turned into a glass or a puddle of water, but not a glass of water. He did provide that magic like a limited wish might be able to turn a ranger into a glass of water, but the wording would have to be composed very carefully, otherwise it is likely that the wish would generate a giant glass of water and place the dual wielder into it. Then there was the question about if a wish maker parsed the wish very well, how many hit points would compose the glass versus the water. It was determined that the watery soul of the ranger would be immune to weapon attacks but could be damaged by drinking, and that a creature with a larger tongue would do more damage than one with huge teeth, which is why you see rangers fighting saber-toothed tigers but never cows. They are afraid of cows. Now, I read that and I was like, wow, there's so much to unpack there. Wait a second.
I think we should just leave it packed in and just throw it in the trash.
Well, so why is it the ranger? This is the thing that I'm confused by. Why is the ranger the class that this is focused on in the first place? Why wouldn't this just be
I don't think that matters.
It doesn't matter. So the ranger is superfluous to this. So it's really...
It could have been a wizard.
Yeah, so basically we're talking about the rules of polymorphing. Is basically what this amounts to. And that you'd have to have something of a uniform type composition. And so that's the problem, is that you have a glass of water. And so you have the water and you have the glass. And these are two different kinds of composite structures. Glass, water. And that you couldn't turn it into the two of those at the same time. Never the twain shall meet. Unless you had a specific kind of wish where they would allow you to do so. And that a cow could theoretically drink you.
With its big tongue doing massive damage to you, that's a sentence we never want to say again.
Talking about dating sims again, let's just get back into
Mimic Simulator.
Mimic Simulator, yeah, exactly. Can you imagine if you actually had a mimic glass of water? That would be amazing. I would love to see that. You go to drink a nice glass of water and mimic! Rawr! That'd be great. That's giving me flashbacks to Prey. Anyway, so I don't know how familiar you are with, like, 2nd edition rules.
Nope.
But under, like, a 3.5 or a 5, we're just going to go with that because we're in the modern era. Polymorph. Okay. Do you know anything about the idea of the uniformity of composition when it comes to polymorphing?
No.
No.
I don't think that's a thing.
I didn't think so either. I thought that the idea of because if you think about it, like, if I can turn into a creature is not of uniform composition.
No. Usually polymorph, I believe, don't quote me, is turn a creature into another creature.
Okay. Now...
Like turning my floor.
Yeah.
Here. It's not like I'm here, never mind. Jerk.
Into an invisible cat? Yep. Okay, great. The floor has turned into a cat.
That's terrifying.
That's excellent.
Anyways, I'm pretty sure polymorph is just turn creature into other creature.
That was my understanding too. Until I read about this very, very weird thing that happened. So, now, what about size? This is something I'm curious about, because they're worried about generating a giant glass of water. And a giant glass of water, by the way, a glass of water in general is not a creature. I think we can agree on that.
Unless we're counting Kool-Aid Man as a giant glass of liquid, then yes.
Oh, wow. No, now I'm starting to wonder.
Don't.
So I could turn...
Stop right there.
Polymorph could turn you into the Kool-Aid Man. That's technically a creature.
No.
So, oh yeah.
Oh no.
Oh no. The Kool-Aid Man doesn't like that. You gotta watch out for a lot of cows that want to get their fruit punch on, if that's the case. Okay, so my understanding of polymorph, unless maybe it's true polymorph or something advanced, is that you could turn into another creature, but size, I don't know if that necessarily matters. I think maybe it can be one size above, one size below, something to that effect. Like, you couldn't necessarily polymorph yourself into, like, a stone giant or something like that.
Probably not. Maybe with a greater polymorph or something like that.
Maybe true polymorph, something to that effect. I guess the real thing that just hit me really weird when I read this.
That's the entire thing.
The whole thing, yeah. Why did someone ask this question? Why did someone sit there and think to themselves, hey, could you turn a ranger into a glass of water? What was going on in their head?
Probably a lot of drugs.
Well, this was during the 2nd edition era, so yeah, it's possible. It's possible. So Skip Williams does this sage advice and apparently rules that it can turn into a creature. You could turn only a creature into an object of uniform composition. My big question, of course, is why would anyone want to do this? I don't understand the purpose of this. Is it because the ranger is threatening you and you figure that a glass of water is not nearly as threatening? And so I have to turn it into a why a glass of water? Why any of this? Why? I saw this and my initial thought was I need Alex to look at this to find out if I'm insane or not.
Yes, definitely. I think if you want to do this in the actual game, I think what we would have to do is roundabout to do this. You could use a wish spell, but that's incredibly hard to get a hold of. So, alright. If you wanted to do this, I think the first step would be using, I think there's a spell, Meld into Stone.
Yes. Okay, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then there should be a stone shape or something like that.
Yeah.
Or
Okay.
there should be
animate object. Isn't there an animate object
No.
so that you can?
Right.
Okay. No. Okay.
So look up Meld into Flesh. You're doing this because I'm on a laptop.
Fair enough. Okay. Meld into Stone. The range is personal. The target is you. The duration is 10 minutes per level, apparently. This is actually 3.5 rules, I guess.
That's
but
fine.
It's fine. We'll go with it. Meld into Stone enables you to meld your body and possessions into a single block of stone. The stone must be large enough to accommodate your body in all 3 dimensions. When the casting is complete, you and not more than 100 pounds of non-living gear merge with the stone. If either condition is violated, the spell fails and is wasted. Okay. While in the stone, you remain in contact, however tenuous, with the face of the stone through which you melded. You remain aware of the passage of time and can cast spells on yourself while hiding in the stone. Blah, 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 blah. The stone's complete destruction expels you and slays you instantly unless you make a DC 18 Fortitude save. Okay. Okay, this is also probably pertinent. Anytime before the duration expires, you can step out of the stone through the surface that you entered. If the spell's duration expires or the effect is dispelled before you voluntarily exit the stone, you are violently expelled and take 5d6 points of damage. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So we do this. You do Meld into Stone. Is that what now it's called? Sorry.
Meld into Stone. It's a transmutation spell. Yeah.
So use Meld into Stone on yourself. So therefore, you become part of this rock.
Got it.
Then what we're going to do is have someone cast Transmute Rock to Mud.
You can do it in mud to rock or rock to mud. Okay, great.
Yeah, we're doing Rock to Mud.
Rock to mud. Okay. Non-magical rock of any sort in the area becomes an equal volume of thick, flowing mud that remains for the spell's duration. The ground in the spell's area becomes muddy enough that the creature can sink into it. Each foot that a creature moves through the mud costs 4 feet of movement, and any creature on the ground when you cast the spell must make a strength saving throw. Okay. Creature must make a saving throw when it moves through it for the first time. Failed save, they sink into the mud and restrained. Restrained condition on itself by pulling itself free of the mud. Okay, you can, if you cast it on a ceiling, the mud falls. Any creature under the mud when it falls must make a dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 4d8 bludgeoning damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a successful one. Okay, so I'm turning this rock into mud. And it's a 40-foot cube. And then we transmute the stone into mud. Now I'm mud.
Okay. So I believe there's also
Oh
A
god.
purify water spell. I don't know what edition it's from.
I think it's actually in 5e2.
So let's see if we can do that.
Okay, purify food and drink. Okay. This is what it is. All non-magical food and drink within a 5-foot radius sphere centered on a point of your choice within range is purified and rendered free of poison and disease.
Okay, so this one says makes the area of dirty, contaminated water clean. Would you consider mud to be contaminated water?
You could make a case for that. Yep. Yeah, you could.
Because
okay. Yeah. We're there. Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there.
So we meld flesh to stone.
Yeah.
We turn the stone into mud. We turn the mud into purified water.
Okay, now I'm water.
Yes.
But now I'm water. Okay.
Yep.
But that doesn't get me into a glass of water.
Well, now we just need to get a glass.
Now we need to get a glass, and we put you in the glass of water. Or, could I make some of the mud into a glass?
I mean, if you're taking the water out of it, the amount of heat you'd have to make mud or sand into glass is extreme.
Yeah.
Okay. So unless you also know fireball and you can glass the terrain literally,
yes,
probably not.
Okay. But hey, we if you just take like 3 specific spells, you might actually be able to turn into water at least.
Yes. And the fun thing is then if someone drinks you, you can just have somebody cast heat water on you.
Yes.
While you're inside them.
Very good. Yes.
And then you'll evaporate and kill them. Because steam burns.
Yes. Then I can turn into steam. And then once I'm steam, would that technically mean that I can fly or levitate?
You'd be in mist form, yeah.
I'd be in mist form, and I also probably couldn't take damage. Except from evaporation, but I'm already evaporated. Doing. Yes. Yep. Oh, but if I don't have any hit points, does that mean that I'm already dead?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're probably dead once you get purified.
I'm probably dead by the time I get turned into mud. I don't know exactly. Like, the thing about it is, though, I think that in D&D rules, there are some creatures that are like the plasmoids that are kind of like semi-solid creatures that are still characters that have hit points. So even if you are like a viscous substance that's not solid... Oh, so you'd just
be an ooze.
You'd be like an ooze. Yeah, you're essentially an ooze. And so technically you could still be a character even if you're an ooze. By those rules. By like the Spelljammer stuff. So...
Listen, D&D's been adding a lot of anthropomorphic creatures lately. The next one is probably going to be a slime person, because that'll attract all the anime fans.
Yeah. Plasmoids, though, I think can take whatever shape they want. Actually, this becomes really easy, because then they could just transmute themselves into a glass of water. They could just change their form into a glass of water, or like maybe
that saves a lot of trouble.
Shapeshift. Yeah, we could have just started there. That would have been, hey, listen, 2E folks. That just to take it back around to our original subject. Look, we solved the glass of water problem way faster by having all of these new.
Listen, I did it in 3 spells.
We did it in 3 spells. 3 spells. That's not bad. We got to water, and then you just get a glass. Everybody has a glass on them, probably in their backpack. So, hey, we're good.
Good place for it.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool. Hey, did our math check out? Anyone who's listening, feel free to determine that we did this badly. That we did this wrong. And we'll talk about it. Why not? This seemed like a really stupid exercise. Let's keep talking about it. Oh, we're all in a glass of water. Watch out for cows. That's why they said there was no cow level. The Rangers were very, very concerned.
Got you. Makes total sense to me now.
Well, that was an episode.
It
Alex?
Was indeed.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We had some goofs and gaffs. And now is time for the show to end. Alex, if folks would want to find out more information about Total Pebble Knockdown, where could they go?
You can go check us out at totalpebbleknockdown.com.
And when you are there, you can check out any of the projects that we have. Please feel free to click on the Patreon banner so that we can engage you in that way. Our patrons get early versions of the full whatever stuff. We have the
Whatever
stuff
we
up there.
just did.
What we just did, full versions of that, and also additional content, some of the stuff that was left on the cutting room floor. You can also check us out on every podcast app known to mankind, and we are more than happy to have you over there. If you are an Anchor, please feel free to leave a video message. We always appreciate those.
Or voice message.
For voice message. And we are currently, at this point, still on various social medias. You can find me at Citanium.
I'm at EXP Limited. Our show is at Pebble Knockdown, and Twitter is a burning fire that, we're still posting on.
We are still posting on it currently. We're gonna go down with the ship probably. But we'll see. We might end up expanding into some other social media sites too.
Don't
at some point.
Tell people that. You can deal with that if you want.
We may end up on some other social media sites, but we'll let you know if we end up putting some stuff over there too. So wherever we end up going. And with that said, I think that we can close out the show. So Alex, what would you want to get turned into if you had the option polymorph into anything?
A supernova.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Whoa!
Yes.
All right.